So now I'm gonna show a propose a consciousness mechanistic model, a simple model. Of course, it's a conceptual one. Okay, the model is based on the efficiency principle, or so. It's assumed here that consciousness enhances some way efficiency, cognitive efficiency. Okay, so how? Uh, First, it will be a two-level system consciousness. There are two-level systems, of course, a conscious and unconscious one. Okay, and it's modular, integrated. So it will be separated in modules. Those modules will be integrated. Okay, this is the model. What does the model is supposed to explain, to give explanations to? The differentiation between conscious and unconscious processing or cognition. Okay, what's the function of consciousness? Let's see. So first, it's well known that pattern recognition is a very difficult task. Okay, the development of the technology of pattern recognition shows that to recognize vision, to recognize shapes, to recognize uh, any visual scene. Okay, it's very difficult. Shapes, smell, taste, touch, sounds, all are very difficult tasks. Okay, very energy intensive, energy required, or processing intensive. Okay, time intensive, etc. Resource intensive. Okay, so if you have one system dual model, it would be very difficult to implement. Okay, why? We have too many input physical values to recognize for any function. Okay, and too many cognitive functions. Okay, we are have to see many scenarios and shapes every time. Okay, hear many sounds, etc. Too many input physical values, and, and for each too many cognitive functions. Okay, so it's a difficult task. How to improve this? Let's see. One possible way is by modularity, or a strategy of specialization, or any function. Each function would be a separated part recognition mechanism, specialized and very efficient for its function. Okay, so vision is specialized to recognize light patterns. Okay, physical patterns. Hearing, hearing, it's specialized in uh, recognize sounds, etc. Okay, uh, then we can have efficient and specialized modules. We can call it each modules, but they have also to communicate for a complete part recognition of of an object, for example, or a scenario, or any physical entity in the reality. Okay, so there is also an integration problem. That's very well known in the engineering literature. Okay, also in science in general. So the modularity problem is well known, even in the field of consciousness in the literature. Okay, so the efficiency problem posed as a mechanistic framework, and needs it's related to modularity. Okay, so a modular system might be conscious. An explanation of consciousness need to be functionalist. Okay, so in the literature, this idea is not new. Okay, it's very well known. There are principles for which we can propose or build models of consciousness or explanations of consciousness. Okay, integration problem. The same is here. Integration problem. What concept of consciousness? This author here. Integration is the way to study consciousness experimentally, behaviorally, neurobiologically, and computationally. Okay, integration. So these are uh, principles that may be helpful to consciousness. So now the model, or finally, okay, I call it two-level modular integrated model. Two-level because there are two levels of cognitive activity here. Let's see. The level one are specialized modules, okay, for any each cognitive functions of interest, okay. They can be considered or defined as unconscious recognition, unconscious cognitive activity, okay. What's the effect of this one? They are very effective for organizing its physical values, and they can have as give as an output a more simple, more easy to process result. Okay, output. In patrocognition terms, we can, or physical terms, we could say less physical values to process. Red below, many physical values to process. Black here, uh, 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 considerably less number of physical values as an output. So this is easier for a second level to that is also specialized, okay, to recognize the outputs of the first level. So you can define or consider this as a conscious recognition of the level two. All the levels one are unconscious recognition. The level two are conscious. Is conscious. Okay, have one level two, or okay, could have more than one. Let's say one. Okay, why we can consider this? We can define this. Okay, because it would be more efficient. It could integrate specialized modules. This is specialized in this. Okay, these are specialized for each functions. This one is specialized in the integration of all functions. Okay, we could even have an output of level two that could be also an input. Okay, so we could define a kind of self-consciousness. Okay, so that's why I call it a two-level, because there are two-level. It's modular and integrated. It's integrate efficiently. Okay, model of consciousness, a conceptual model, simple conceptual model. Okay, what can the model explain? Let's see. First, it can be used as a consciousness definition. It's a model based, and it's unambiguous. Can You can see clearly without ambiguity what's conscious cognition, what's unconscious cognition. Okay, so it can do be interpreted as a representation or concepts. How the output of the first level, the modules of the first level are very efficient, or very efficient physical pattern. Okay, the patterns of input oil one is very physical heavy. It's very physical demanding. Okay, this one is much simpler or much cheaper physical less number of physical values. Okay, very easy for L2 to process. So this could be considered concepts or representation of a concept. Okay, so if you have an image, there are lots of many physical values to recognize and process the mechanism to recognize. But its representation to the conscious level, it's much more simpler. So it's much more easy for the second level to recognize it and integrate with all others. Okay. Uh, Also, it uh, explain the gain function of consciousness. If consciousness is defined as this, consciousness would improve efficiency, okay? Mainly efficiency in number of patterns to process, okay? That's this idea that's similar to the integration integrated information theory, okay? The number what there the ideas is kind of integration of some that define what's conscious and unconscious, okay, for a threshold, okay. So here is the number of patterns and the threshold is here. uh, Many physical values, less physical values to process, okay, to compute, if you say, okay. And it's also compatible to global workspace theory, because there, what's the principle is priority, okay. Many functions compete in the priority of cognitive, kind of L2 cognitive level, okay. But what is priority, okay, to have efficiency, okay. So in global workspace theory, it's similar because it has kind of L1. They are functions. Only those that gains priority that are conscious. So this architecture, this model is compatible. Of course, it's not exactly the same, but it's compatible to global space theory. Okay, let's test the model uh, here with, for example, with uh, immune system, this immunological system. Immuno- how? Immunological system, they can learn new disease, learn new pathogens, okay, the patterns of new pathogens, okay, memorize it and process it. Or when you are have some immunization to disease, okay, it will readily answer. Yeah, I am immune answer, okay. So immune system, the immune system has basic the basic cognitive function of learning, memorizing, and processing. Can the question is, can the immune system be considered a conscious system? So does your immune system is conscious uh, for any disease? That's the question. How can this model solve this? Okay, answer this. The standard model of immune system doesn't, as far as I know, as far as I searched it, okay, does not have this architecture. Okay, for any new disease that it learned, so okay, it learned that disease as an L1 level here, okay, one disease, one disease, one disease. Of course, they learn, they are memorizing their efficient response, immune response, okay, but they do not integrate many different diseases to make a combined response, okay, the immune system. So the immune system does not fit the conscious system as this model in face of this model, okay. So we can, this model can be tested for in many systems, many cases, okay. I almost forgot to mention the domain and image description of consciousness. This model brings a clear what the if you think about a mathematical function. Consciousness, what's the domain of consciousness? Are pattern. The input of consciousness are pattern. We are conscious of patterns, okay. And also the image, what's output of consciousness, are also patterns. Okay, of course, this makes easy because every physical set of physical values are patterns. Okay, so the inputs are set of physical values, the outputs are also set of physical values. But that's the reality of nature. Okay, so but and this model describes it very clear. Okay, so next, so let's talk about some cognitive self consciousness uh, topics here. Self consciousness. So this model we can model or describe or consider what could be the concept of self consciousness in this model very easily. Okay, it could be or the output of conscious is also an input of the conscious level. Okay, so that could be a kind of consciousness, a way to define this concept of self-consciousness. Okay, or but I will show another phrase. I have lots of phrases here that exemplifies it. A powerful enough pattern recognition system can recognize its own patterns of cognitive activities. A powerful, that's again, a powerful enough pattern recognition system can recognize its own patterns of cognitive activities. So self-consciousness for as a pattern recognition phenomenon, it's not that uh, difficult to imagine. Okay, so this could be self-consciousness, consciousness of consciousness, or self cognitive consciousness, or consciousness of self consciousness, and so on. Okay, consciousness of self cognitive activity. So all this way of seeing what's self consciousness fits on this idea of pattern recognition and the model of with a second level of conscious cognition. Okay, it's compatible. Another one, let me see. Is the consciousness concept relevant? I'm talking about concept. Is it relevant in nature? First, if the efficiency principle is taken account, okay, of course it's relevant because it could bring more efficiency in cognition. Okay, but let's say some examples one example in the real world. Okay, animals. Why do we generally think that animals, for example, mammals, are more conscious than, for example, a bacteria? Okay, does this model helps us to have an answer? Yes, because animals they move. Okay, they are not static. So if they move, they have to organize much more patterns, or many more patterns than a static well-being being. Okay, because they have to face fast changing patterns. If you move from place to place, your environment are always changing. Okay, so lots of new patterns to recognize. Okay, a lot more in space and time, much more patterns in space and time. So uh, the more moving is living being, okay, it would require a more sophisticated cognitive brain, okay, or cognitive system to control itself. So they need something like a conscious cognitive mechanism to efficiently control itself. Okay, so that could be an explanation of why the consciousness concept is relevant in the reality. Okay, so is it Is it necessary for human level intelligence? And I think no, of course. More cognitive capable a system is, a cognitive system, a system is, okay, more intelligent could be that system. But in the case of human level intelligence, I don't think so. Why? Because animals have, in face of this model does not, this model here, okay, it's the same in humans, okay, in any other animals that have compatible cognitive capabilities as humans, okay, all both seems to have this structure of cognition, okay. So human level intelligence, so this model could not explain or be related to human level intelligence, okay. That may be some proposals in my that I agree. Kind of reinforcing learning. Okay, humans may have more the learning instinct in human. Okay, is stronger than many than non-humans animals. So our maybe our human level intelligence. Okay, uh, is due to other factors specifically on learning. Okay, uh, let's talk about how now about phenomenal consciousness or the the existence. Okay, the experience. Okay, so when we experience the famous one, uh, what's like to be a bat. Okay, what's the experience that we find. Okay, we have. That's called phenomenal consciousness. Okay, does this model uh, is related to this? No. This is the model is a mechanistic model that could give some insights of why is consciousness important. How can we understand it? Okay, but let's talk a little about phenomenal consciousness. That's very important in philosophy of mind. Okay, in my opinion, consciousness, the science and the discussion, academic discussion of consciousness is very advanced. Okay, so you have lots of layers of descriptions of conscious beings. Okay, from neurophysiological. Okay, there are lots of authors that describe consciousness in the neurophysiological. Okay, mechanistic. The one work that's very related to this work is this one, constitute the notion of constitutive mechanism of consciousness. Uh, these authors have a very good review, wrote a very good review on this. Okay, also on the cognitive and psychological level. Okay, high order theories, psychological explanation of consciousness. So the description of conscious phenomena, consciousness is not, it's, in my opinion, is very well based. Okay, for me, what would be a an experience, a phenomenal consciousness? Okay, all the set of neurophysiological reactions. Of course, these are due to mechanistics. This gives mechanistics and the result in cognitive. But the set of neurophysiological reactions, for me, it's what could there's no very it's not that difficult to understand, to imagine that our experience are the set of physical of physiological reactions through any pattern we interact with. Okay, what's the could be this work, the contribution of this work? Okay, I'm now describing consciousness as a in the pattern recognition layer. Okay, pattern recognition mechanistic layer with the language of pattern recognition. Okay, also we can talk about the physical layer down to panpsychism. That's the contribution of this work. Okay, And another topic of in the phenomenal consciousness line, okay, the differentiation between first person subjective experience and third person objective experience. Okay, so there is this notion that the experience is first person and subjective and fundamentally different from a third person objective perspective when we see on one outside the object or phenomena outside of cognition. Okay, we face it with objective observation, and when we our experience are subjective observation, and this distinction it could be a fundamental one that gives consciousness some kind of hard problem or mystery. I don't agree with this any much. Of course, it's maybe a working distinction for practical purposes, but it's not a fundamental distinction. Okay, so for me, they are they fundamentally the same? For me, they are. Okay, how every third person objective uh, recognition or interaction we have, or when you perceive any object or any external object, it's also a subjective experience. When you see an image or an object, you are having a subjective experience of it. Okay, so all third person experience objective perspective are also first person subjective experience. Okay, and more, I think that first person subjective experiences are as objective as third persons. How we our subjective experience, like our feelings, our emotions, are commonly described and very well agreed in a society. We know we have our subjective experience. We give names to them. We talk to each other. We agree most in many or most part. We understand that the subjective experience of others. So subjective experiences are, in practical terms, very objective. We can two people can talk very objectively about their subjective experience. So for me, they're fundamentally the same. The first person subjective experience and the third person objective experience. Okay. So in the part recognition mechanism point of view, how could this be explained? That external physical values and internal physical recognizing external physical values and recognizing internal physical values, there is no fundamental difference on that are physical values. So subjective experience are internal physical values. Internal means of uh, cognitively internal, okay, and external physical values also, okay. Uh, so this distinction here, of course, it's a working distinction that have its value, okay, but I don't think it's a fundamental distinction as a cognitive in the cognitive point of view. Now, is there any other philosophy of mind line that's similar to the model I'm presenting here? Yes, there's I commented that it's the two-level integration model. It's compatible with the global workspace theory, etc. But there is one that's there, it's very in line. Okay, it's the idea of constitutive mechanisms of consciousness. And this this author uh, uh, first developed by Hevon, but this paper is gives a very good review on it. Okay, the description of consciousness as mechanism. Okay, a concrete physical phenomenon, a concrete mechanism phenomenon. Okay, physical mechanism phenomenon in this paper is very similar. Of course, it's not the same. The model I presented here with patrocognition language it's very it's mine. Okay, but here they have this notion of mechanisms of consciousness that's very similar to what I'm presenting here. Okay, in this is made in the paper, this paper. Okay, it shows how one way of interpret consciousness. Okay, there is a model that we consciously the first line here of objects, then we uh, construct our conscious mind construct models in various levels of understanding of phenomenon. Okay, even our conscious mind phenomena. Okay, but what would be the experience of, for example, here we can have a cognitive representation of what is a cat. Okay, but what would be our experience of seeing a cat, interacting with a cat? Okay, so the experience is much more complex, and what really happens, all the interactions of cognitive interactions in the second line here. Okay, that we cannot consciously assess at all. Okay, so the model is a good representation, but the execution is what would be experienced. The model is a way of we consciously interpret it. Our experience, okay, is conscious, is also maybe unconscious in this uh, his description. Okay, but we have a good understanding of all parts, of all layers of understanding it. So it's very this model is very similar to what I presented. This idea of mechanisms of consciousness is what I developed here. Okay, in this work. Okay, again, continuing now, let's face the idea of panpsychism. Again, I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a philosopher, so I'm only um, facing this as an amateur. Let's see. So the idea, what would be the idea of Descartes' radical doubt? The idea that we could, if we can doubt many things we perceive in the environment. We have um, partial, or it's not precise, not precise perception of the world. We have many errors in our perception, so we can doubt if what we are seeing or if we are experiencing is real, okay, or is correct or is exact. Okay, uh, how can I link this to panpsychism? Okay, can there be a pattern recognition answer or a solution to this? I think so. Okay, so in this work here, in this book, the author says that experiential phenomena are physical phenomena. Okay, that's one of the articles inside this book, one of the chapter. Okay, I think so. No, no, it's only one author. Okay. Uh, just for fun, I would stress here one of the famous phrases of Descartes. Okay, here what that was. I think, therefore I am. I rephrase it as I recognize patterns, therefore I am. Okay, so I uh, substitute thinking for patterns. Okay, thinking is pattern recognition, in my point of view. Okay, uh, just a rephrase of the famous phrase. Uh, but this is uh, uh, brings the question of can we talk about something like a metaphysics of mind? So for me, pattern recognition can be considered a fundamental cognitive activity. So pattern recognition is a fundamental, a foundation of cognition, one of the foundations, maybe one of the most basic or most basic foundations of cognitive activity of cognition. Okay, so maybe this is a more foundational way of saying the famous Descartes phrase. Okay, just for fun. Now let's face the idea of panpsychism. In my formulation, my language of partial cognition, how can we understand or describe panpsychism? Okay, can there exist a panpsychism mechanism? So how can I approach this? So pattern recognition is both a cognitive and a physical concept. Okay, recognition. The name recognition, there is cognition inside. Okay, but it's also a very important physical concept. So it's pattern recognition is a cognitive and physical concept, important physical concept. In this Descartes' language, it would be that pattern recognition is a fundamental link between res cogito, what we think, and resistência, the physics. Okay, physical world and cognitive world. Okay, so maybe it's a scientific concept that uh, more directly or better link these two concepts. Okay, of course, pattern recognition needs pattern recognition mechanisms, but remember that they are physical interactions chain, and physical interaction is isomorphic to pattern. Okay, so even one electron photon interaction, as in, is a pattern recognition event. Okay, so could consider that panpsychism, the concept of panpsychism, is embedded or exists as a pattern recognition. Pattern recognition could be considered as the panpsychism uh, uh, foundation. Okay, okay. So we can consider that pattern recognition is a manifestation of a panpsychism idea. That's not that's plausible. Okay, but could then this idea uh, explain that consciousness, the concept of consciousness, is panpsychism? Every electron is consciousness. The answer here is no. Why no? Because uh, consciousness as a cognitive function needs what? Multi-component level system, complex system, not only one physical entity or only one physical interaction. There are multiple. They need mechanism. Okay, mechanism needs many components or many particles, many components, chain of interactions, etc., etc. So So for any more complex, so the idea of panpsychism is compatible with partial cognition only in the physical interaction interpretation, okay, view. But for practical cognitive functions, no, panpsychism does not fit, at least in this partial cognition point of view I'm presenting here. Okay, so let's see a less strange idea on the philosophy of patterns. Okay, is pattern recognition, now I'm talking about philosophy of pattern, because I think pattern recognition should be important concept in philosophy, okay, mainly in philosophy of mind, but in philosophy of in general. Let's see, is pattern recognition a scientific concept capable of explaining or defining itself? Another strange idea I'm bringing here, okay. Why? Because everything in the I said that everything in the universe are patterns. Okay, everything, all things in the universe are patterns. Okay, so pattern issue, the concept of pattern issue should be defined or explained by patterns. Pattern issue itself uh, is a pattern. Okay, so let's see. So is the pattern concept defined by patterns? Like a word is a concept defined by words. So there are some cases where a concept is defined by itself. Okay, is this an autology, or a word that defines itself, or a tautology? Okay, or a kind of self-reference or circular reasoning, paradox, a logical fallacy. Let's see. So I'm amateur in this field. I'm only making some comments, amateur comments. Okay, let's see. So, but I'm not the only one that uh, uh, some professional people also think something like that. Okay, uh, this one, Michael Graziano said, this argument I know because I can feel it right now. The argument of experience, consciousness experience as experience, or phenomenal consciousness or first person consciousness, uh, is difficult because like phrases like this, I know because I can feel it right now. Okay, so this, as if consciousness has a special place in nature to explain. What's his opinion? It's a tautological. This is a tautology. Okay, to argue for the presence of feeling because you feel it is to state it's true because it's true, and I agree a little with him. Okay, okay. So this whole idea of uh, uh, phenomenal experience may have some tautological aspects on it. Okay, so let's think about possible solutions. First, the definition of in terms of definition, partial definition of partial cognition, pattern being defined by patterns. No? So let's see definitions and models. Uh, so generally, they are constructed over axioms or postulates. Okay, but what are axioms and postulate? Let's what are they? How are they physically or physically and effectively executed? How a brain or a cognitive system can uh, uh, activate be activated by an axiom or postulate. Okay, what I'm saying here is that axioms and postulates are nothing more than pattern recognition. We recognize the axioms. The cognitive system has to recognize the properties of the patterns of axioms or the postulates. Okay, Why? Because they are mechanisms. So cognitive, the minds or any cognitive system are mechanisms that recognize that axioms. So axioms and postulates are part of recognition. So mechanism, but how part of recognition could have axioms, could deal with postulates? Okay, one idea I'm propose here. Some hints are mechanisms, and part of recognition mechanisms have built-in physical values. These built-in physical values for any mechanism are their axioms or their postulates. Okay, so the some partial use mechanisms will recognize some patterns, and the most basic patterns we call them axioms. Why do mechanisms recognize axioms? Some axioms, okay, because they have already between physical values that are compatible with these axioms. If you have a robust enough partial cognitive mechanism like a human mind or human brain, okay, maybe you can recognize many axioms, okay, or many, or maybe the most fundamental ones to understand, to have the capability of understanding the universe like we do, okay. So what about definition? How definition works? Okay, but I'm asking about how in the physical mechanism description does definition works. It's the same. A definition is a recognition of a pattern. Funda- or say definition are fundamentally on pattern recognition. Okay, they works fundamentally on pattern. We define, only we define, we are establishing some patterns, okay, for that defines that concept, okay, and pattern recognition mechanisms that will recognize that those concepts or those physical systems are in that definition, okay. For example, definition as a set constructions, like how does this work? Like this, we can define, for example, oranges. Okay, what are oranges? So we can define the oranges by many of its properties. Okay, geometrical properties, color properties, the, uh, physical constitution, softness, hardness, etc., etc. Okay, but for those would be their axioms. Okay, but for any of those properties can be defined as a more basic properties, generally physical properties, and more basic, more basic. Okay, so we have to go to a fundamental set of properties that are physical interactions. Okay, so definitions, all definitions, in all this line of definitions needs a pattern recognition mechanism to stab- recognize which are the set of properties. Okay, in the most basic properties we know from science and physics are basic physical interactions. Okay, so the basic physical interactions would be maybe our last tautology. Why? Because we recognize them, and they cannot be, they are the last postulate, or maybe they cannot be described as any from any other one. Okay, but what why I say it's that our last tautology? That's because the physical interaction, the basic physical interactions, they construct, they are part of a physical mechanisms that are part of recognition mechanisms. that recognize physical interactions. So it's kind of a tautology. Physical interactions are are description of physical interactions, and we have no way to it's the only way we can we know how to describe them. Okay, so maybe it's our ultimate or last or more fundamental tautology where we cannot escape. Okay, uh, so this idea is like this: patterns are physical interactions. Yes. So physical interactions can activate or organize physical interaction. So this could be uh, the most basic tautology that we cannot escape. Okay. So let's make a conclusion here. Well, so the main idea of my work is the promotion of patrocognition concept as a philosophical important, and mainly in philosophy of mind as it should be taken more seriously. And my point of view, okay, is it a catchphrase, buzzword, rhetorical device? Maybe, okay, but I think it's uh, should be on the philosophy one of philosophy of mind foundation. Patriotism should be more to be taken more serious in the philosophy of mind foundation. Okay, I think it's very promising. I applied this to try to develop a mechanistic consciousness model and definition. Okay, in face of this, there is no really hard problem. It seems very simple. Okay, to define it, to explain things uh, in a mechanical consciousness model, like the two-level model of modular and integration model I proposed here. Okay, of course, it's a conceptual model. Okay, the real consciousness in animals, humans, etc., depends on physiological complex environments. Okay, conditions. But a simple mechanism like this, it's a proposal like, for example, Rutherford, the models of Rutherford model, Thomson or Bohr models were to atomic. Okay, so atomic models. Uh, to understand atoms, it was necessary. It was worth useful to have simple models in increasing levels of complexity to explain a concept like atom. So, mechanistic consciousness models proposals are in the same line. Okay, we could also talk about a little about the concept of panpsychism. Okay, of course, this is only more than it's not a model, only a comment. Okay, that panpsychism, the idea of panpsychism is compatible, is pattern compatible. Okay, the idea of pattern or partial cognition is compatible to the idea of panpsychism, but only in, in physical interaction scale. Okay, only as uh, or say we consciously uh, understand or know the existence of physical interaction because we have partner cognition in the physical interaction scale. Okay, but for complex cognitive functions like consciousness, okay, we need microscopic models. Okay, only the idea of panpsychism is not enough. Okay, now of course, most of what I'm talking about depends on the. It was possible because were constructed over the strong premise that physical interactions, all physical interactions, were discovered by particle recognition and are compatible or isomorphic to particle recognition. Okay, So this is the all my work. I worked for some years. This there are many versions, previous versions, but partial versions of this online. If you find out, look for. Uh, I never for the first time now I wrote a really complete paper on it that I feel that I could write all that I think. Okay, there are two previous versions, but they are very they were only tentative drafts. Okay, this is a more serious proposal. Okay, here I wrote really my it's already a draft. Okay, it's the research gate. Okay, universal consensus mechanistic patterns. It's papers all free available. Okay, I'm thinking about switching it to peer review publication on philosophy of mind. I'm presenting this the same work in two congress here in Brazil in philosophy of mind. Then if you have any updates, I will write here in the comments. Okay. So first I apologize for my poor English skills. My English pronunciation is very broken because I don't practice any much to speak in English. And I appreciate any comments. I will try to answer anyone to that have questions to me. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.